Hey, this is Corey with Hardcore Gamer, and today we are interviewing Lee Mathers, Senior Creative Director at Codemasters for F124. Lee, I'm going to throw a question at you that's off base or up front. Uh, what are your personal thoughts on Lewis Hamilton going to Ferrari next season?
Well, if you look closely behind me, you might just see a glimpse of a Lewis Hamilton cap just hanging on the core of my radiator. So I'm obviously a big Lewis fan. I've realized in recent years that I follow drivers more closely than I do the team. So Lewis moving to Ferrari for me is just really exciting. It's just another part of an already amazing career. So yeah, I was absolutely blown away and really excited when I saw that announcement.
You do have a little Ferrari thing up there behind you. What is that?
Oh, I think so. I've got the McLaren over that shoulder, and
Mhm.
I've got the Las Vegas poster over that shoulder. Yeah, so that's the Las Vegas poster from last year.
Oh, yeah. All right. So on to the game, F124, coming later this month. I believe it's the final day of May for worldwide release. With F124 Career Mode getting its largest revamp since 2016, can we expect variations in the career path to help with replayability in the mode?
Yeah, definitely. So at its core, the journey is whatever you want it to be. So you can go in there, you can either play as a driver icon, so one of the older characters that we've got in the game. You can play as an F2 character and start your journey in F2. You can go in as an established Formula One driver, and obviously, if you're going in as someone like Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen, your goals and targets are very different to going in as somebody such as Sargent or Albon, for example. Or of course, you can go in and create an avatar and play as yourself, and then you'll utilize all of the systems to progress your career. So whether that's R&D systems that will allow you to develop the team that you work for, or whether you want to look at potentially moving to a different team and use the new contract system. But specifically to your question, something which we've added this year to really escalate the really give a long-term playability in career is we have some now modifiers which when the players have completed the first season, they open up a bunch of R&D modifiers which allow players to change the way that those subsequent seasons will play. So you may decide to impose a chip shortage on the season, and that will change the way R&D works. You may find there's financial difficulties. You may find, you apply something which really mixes up that season. So for players who, for example, have played as Max and Lewis, and maybe they take the title in the first season, you can then apply these modifiers to get a very different experience in subsequent seasons. Or you could be a player who goes in, as I say, as a driver or further back in the field, and you work through multiple career seasons using the contract system to move between teams. So there's different ways in which players can really elongate those playthroughs.
All right. Who are the legacy drivers that you're most excited for this year?
I mean, obviously, Nigel Mansell's a big one for me because Nigel is a local for me. Our studio is relatively close to where Nigel grew up. James Hunt, obviously, being a new one, is fantastic. Again, it's such an amazing story. And then, you've got to be pleased with Senna and Michael Schumacher as well. I mean, those are some of the absolute greats of the sport. And I think I'd happily play as any of those.
Can we expect a full mustache for Nigel Mansell in the game?
100%, yes.
um, what are the aspects of the handling changes that will be immediately apparent on racing?
Yeah, I think instantly the second that the player leaves the starting line, they'll notice that stability in the car is increased, that traction is increased, that the ability to get the car off the line effectively is easier. Because again, that's feedback we've been given by the drivers that a Formula One car has astonishing grip. As soon as you get heat into those tires, that traction is very rarely an issue, especially out of corners. So you'll instantly notice traction and stability off the line is going to be noticeable. You'll then realize as you come to the braking zone, the braking feels different. You'll feel the weight shift as the car leans forward more because the suspension kinematics allow for that movement in the car. Previously, you felt it through the camera. Now you'll feel it more through the body of the car. And then, of course, once you're into the turn, you'll feel that amazing confidence to lean hard on that grip. And you'll feel through the rumble on the controller or through the force feedback on a wheel how you're loading the tires up. And when you sort of reaching that level of that limit of adhesion, how they start to sort of skip and scrub a little before obviously you push way beyond that and end up having a bit of a slide. So I think those are the things that you'll certainly notice first up. And then as you get into it, you'll certainly realize that the implementation for the ERS system just adds such an incredible depth to the racing. I was only saying to the guys this morning, I had some great races Friday evening where I was chasing down a couple of AI cars and I could see that their little red light on the back was flashing and that they were derating, and I knew that they were down on energy, and I knew that I'd got a little bit left in the bank, and it just gives you that incentive to really push harder and try and catch them. So it really does bring in a new strategic element to the racing as well.
All right, next question that I have for Lee. What are some of the specific changes that will appear in this year's game that mirrors any changes to the actual F124 season in terms of rules, any type of specific aspect that would have been missing from last year that's updated for this year that is just something specific to F1 itself?
So again, it's very much in keeping with the authenticity of the sport. So we're mirroring the race weekend structure, and of course the season structure as well. So all of the real tracks and drivers, and of course China's back on the calendar this year. We've already seen the race. It's a fantastic circuit, one I've always enjoyed. So it's really nice to have that as back as part of the season as well. And then of course any sort of tire changes over the course of the year, tires will be correct for the relevant tracks. Performance of the vehicles will obviously match the performance of the vehicles to the season. So we always like to keep the authenticity piece as strong as possible every year.
Fantastic. All right. Back to the career mode. In what ways would the career mode keep the player engaged with narratives and rumors throughout the season?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that will come out of the new contract system. So something that we wanted to build into the contract system this year was the concept of a secret meeting. In that, we regularly hear and you see drivers have been talking throughout the paddock, and you'll sometimes read in the press, right? You'll see one of the journalists will say, "Well, I've just seen X driver leaving a specific hospitality," and it's like, what were they doing? Were they having a conversation about work? Were they just meeting a friend for a coffee? Who knows? And what we wanted to do was bring in the concept of what we term secret meetings during the contracts phase. So you'll be approached by another team. You'll enter that first round of a secret meeting. You can decline and say, "No, thank you. I have no interest in joining you. Thank you very much. Move on." Or you can take the risk of opening that first conversation with them and starting the process of potentially moving teams. There's a small risk attached to that. It could be found out by your team that you're in conversation with them, or it could just be that you'll find out a little bit more about what that team's offering and what they've got in mind. And then you can maybe move on to the second stage of talks later in the season. That increases the risk that you might get found out. And then finally, of course, when you move to the third stage, there's a good chance that the paddock will have realized that you're in conversation with another team, and your team will be unhappy with that as well. It will decrease your bargaining power with your current team if you decide to stay. And it'll also decrease your recognition with your current team as well. They won't be happy that you've progressed talks with another team. But of course, you can still stay with your team if you're meeting the goals and targets that they set of you, but it could weaken your bargaining power. And of course, you'd obviously at this point have really progressed the talks with the team that you're interested in moving to as well. By the time you've reached the third round of the contract talks, you'll know as much detail about that team as you need to make a fully educated decision.
Fantastic. And Lee, last question I have is, can players expect any legacy or classic content? And is there any possibility of the classic cars or whatnot coming back in the future?
So I always say with the classic cars, I never say never to those. They're always fantastic and really engaging. But at the moment, the real focus has been on the authenticity of the current season, making sure we get everything as authentic as possible. Obviously, we've got the drivers, the classic drivers. So you've got the likes, as we mentioned, of Hunter and Senna and Mansell, and when Pablo Montoya's in there this year, a particular favourite of mine from the past. But this year as well, I say circuits, focusing on updating circuits as well was important for us. So there's a huge piece of work there in that we've updated Spa and Silverstone, two of the most popular and famous tracks on the calendar. So the real focus has been on the current season, the authenticity of all of that. But I would never say never to classics coming back at some point.
Fantastic. Lee, that's all I have for you today. Look forward to F124 towards the end of May and the upcoming U.S. Grand Prix in Miami, well, the Miami GP rather, in the U.S. Thank you again, Lee.
Awesome. Cheers for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.